A group of friends went on a recreational dive at a cave in the middle of the Adriatic Sea. Many native islanders avoid this cave because the name implies it's evil and pagan. However, these friends went anyway, not knowing things would turn horrific real fast. The Adriatic Sea is a large area of water that separates Italy from the Balkans. It's like the top part of the Mediterranean Sea. It goes from the Strait of Otranto in the south to the northwest, towards the Po Valley. Poganica Bay is found on the southern side of Solta Island, in the middle of the Adriatic Sea in Croatia. There's a cave entrance shaped like a funnel, about 7 feet wide and 30 feet underwater. As you go in, it gets wider, and after about 49 feet, there are 2 paths, one shallow and one deep. Inside, the cave is filled with very fine mud. If the mud gets stirred up in the water, it's hard to see anything, even with bright flashlights. In the cave, there aren't any currents underwater. The water starts off warm, about 75 degrees Fahrenheit at the top, but gets colder as you go deeper, reaching about 57 degrees Fahrenheit at the bottom. The shallow part of the cave goes down to about 118 feet below sea level, with the roof starting at around 69 feet. In the deeper part of the cave, it goes down to about 187 feet, with the roof starting at around 115 feet. Even though Poganica Bay is known as a dangerous cave, many divers still like to explore it. Some locals even avoid the bay because they think it's evil and spooky, just by its name. Despite the risks, it's a popular spot for diving because of its unique features. Miroslav Kuklis was 31 years old and from the Czech Republic. He was a cook, but he also loved scuba diving. On Tuesday, September 10, 2002, he was with some friends on a boat in the Adriatic Sea. Some of the people on the boat were experienced divers, but others were just starting out. They were all having a great time, enjoying the beautiful views as they sailed along. Miroslav was feeling good that day, both physically and mentally. He had some basic training in diving, and compared to the others, he was one of the more experienced divers in the group. They were all aboard Poganica Bay, ready for their adventure. Before they started their main dive, Miroslav decided to jump into the water. While the others stayed on the boat to prepare dinner, Miroslav went exploring underwater. He found something exciting, the entrance to a cave. The group had heard rumors about a cave in Poganica Bay, but they didn't know what it looked like. They were all curious to find out. When Miroslav got back to the boat, he shared his discovery with the rest of the team, and as they sat down for dinner, they talked about whether they should explore the cave that very night. Some of them were excited about the idea, but others were hesitant. They weren't sure where the entrance Miroslav found led to. Some thought it might just be a small hole, while others thought it could be the entrance to a big cavern. After dinner, they kept talking about whether or not to explore the cave. However, while they were eating, Miroslav had a little bit of alcohol, but not too much. By the time they finished dinner, it was already 9 p.m. The captain of the boat decided to take a nap, and 4 of the divers on board decided to go into the water. They split into 2 pairs, with each pair having one experienced diver and one less experienced diver. During the dive, Miroslav took his time and stayed back a bit, watching what was happening. The 2 teams went underwater and headed toward the cave. Before long, they entered a tunnel that led further into the cave. Once they entered the tunnel, they realized it was a big cave system. They weren't ready for such a deep and complicated cave dive at the time, so they decided to turn back and come up to the surface. They spent a little while enjoying the night dive, watching the fish and octopuses swimming around in the water, before heading back to the boat. When they reached the boat, their friends who stayed on board told them that Miroslav hadn't come back up yet. It was already 10:30 p.m., and there was no sign of him. Little did the group know, Miroslav had a last-minute change of plans. While the others were already diving, he decided to explore the cave on his own. Since he didn't tell anyone about his change of plans, they assumed he had joined them in the deep gallery. without realizing they had moved to shallower waters because the gallery was too deep. They waited anxiously for Miroslav to return, but as time passed, there was still no sign of him. At 10:46 p.m., a dive instructor and another diver decided to go back into the water to search for him. Equipped with a flashlight and a safety line, they descended into the cave, going as far as they dared in their search. Despite their thorough search, Miroslav was nowhere to be found in the cave. They started to worry because they knew his air supply would soon run out if he was still underwater. Fearing the worst, they decided to call the police for help. At 12:15 a.m., the diving group made an emergency call to the police station in Split, Croatia. They explained that Miroslav hadn't returned from the dive that started about 3 hours earlier. The police advised them to wait while trained police divers would be sent to assist them the next morning. So they anchored their boat at Poganica Bay, right above the cave entrance, and waited anxiously for help to arrive. It was a restless and sleepless night for them, as they hoped and prayed for Miroslav's safe return. At 8 a.m. the next morning, on September 11, 2002, the police divers arrived at the location to start the search operation. 2 brave police divers went into the water to look for Miroslav's body. Unfortunately, tragedy struck during the search. One of the divers, Oliver Merrick, who was only 25 years old and part of the Special Police Unit, never made it back. After releasing the buddy line, he vanished into the depths of the cave. The other diver, Bernard Magic, managed to make it back to the surface, but it wasn't easy. His air supply was almost gone, and he had developed a serious case of decompression sickness. He was quickly transported to Split for treatment. Bernard spent 6 hours in a hyperbaric chamber at the Naval Medical Institute of the Navy. Thankfully, his condition wasn't critical, and he eventually recovered. The next day, additional teams were called in to help with the search for both the missing diver Miroslav and the police diver who didn't resurface the day before. This time, the search teams were better equipped and prepared than before. They were determined to find answers and bring closure to the tragic situation. As the new team entered the water to begin their search, they made a heartbreaking discovery. They found the body of the police diver, Bernard, at a depth of 78 feet in one of the shallow sections of the cave. It seemed that he had become lost and disoriented after letting go of his safety line. Tragically, he had likely run out of oxygen and drowned in the depths of the cave. As the search team descended to a depth of 177 feet, they made a chilling discovery. The body of Miroslav was found in the deep gallery. To their shock and horror, they noticed something alarming. There was a knife sticking out of Miroslav's chest. His diving mask was missing from his head, and his scuba regulator had slipped out of his mouth. Additionally, his life jacket was empty, adding to the mystery of the situation. Nearby, they found an empty, low-power flashlight. During the recovery process, the team encountered further challenges. They attempted to remove Miroslav's diving gear from the bottom of the cave, and in doing so, they accidentally dislodged the knife from his chest. Additionally, his diving computer, attached to his arm, fell off as they brought his body to the surface. However, both the knife and the diving computer were later retrieved. With these unsettling discoveries, the team's initial assumption that Miroslav had simply become lost and drowned was called into question. Instead, they began to suspect that he may have been the victim of foul play. The investigation into the circumstances surrounding Miroslav's death took a darker turn as the search team grappled with the possibility of murder in the depths of the cave. After the discovery of the bodies, all of Miroslav's friends agreed to undergo polygraph testing. Before the polygraph test, they were unaware that his body had been found. Surprisingly, everyone except the 2 individuals who were with Miroslav when he went diving passed the test. However, when the words knife and blood were mentioned during the testing, the reactions of those 2 crew members raised suspicions. As a result, they were taken into custody as potential suspects. Following their arrest, the investigation into the incident began. Initially, the 2 individuals were charged with Miroslav's murder, with authorities suspecting a possible homosexual love triangle as the motive. However, formal charges were not pressed at that time. The rest of the crew members were released but were ordered not to leave the country as the investigation continued to unfold. Following the incident, all the diving equipment, including the dive computers, was gathered from the crew for further investigation. Suspicious reddish stains, possibly blood, discovered on the deck were carefully collected for analysis, along with blood samples from each crew member. Additionally, several knives found on the boat were sent for forensic analysis to determine if any were related to the incident. While awaiting the results of the stain sample testing, the scuba gear was meticulously examined. Surprisingly, all dive computers, including the one recovered from Miroslav's body, were found to be in excellent condition. To ensure their accuracy, they were tested in an experimental hyperbaric chamber where they were pressurized to depths exceeding the greatest depth recorded on one of them. Remarkably, all dive computers displayed identical dive profiles during this simulated test. During the autopsy, doctors found some important things about Miroslav's dive suit. They saw a small hole, about 3 by 1 centimeter, on the front left side of the suit. It was kind of slanted, with one corner higher on the side and the other lower in the middle. They also noticed a small hole on the back upper side of his left leg. They found feces in part of the suit covering his body. The most important discovery was a stab wound on Miroslav's chest, between his left nipple and the middle line on the front of his body. This wound matched the hole in his suit, leaving the doctors to think that he was stabbed through his suit. They looked for other injuries, especially on his hands and arms, which could show he tried to defend himself, but they didn't find any other holes in the suit or injuries on his body. Since there was no sign of tampering with the dive computer, investigators relied on its data to understand Miroslav's final dive. The data showed that Miroslav descended straight down to a depth of 165 feet, indicating that he entered the deep gallery of the cave. However, shortly after entering the deep gallery, Miroslav started ascending, suggesting that he may have lost his way and was trying to find the exit. As Miroslav searched for a way out, he likely made a wrong turn and ended up in the shallow gallery. Some divers familiar with the cave system mentioned that mistaking the entrance to the shallow gallery for the exit was a common mistake, as they resemble each other. This error may have also been made by the missing rescue policeman, who went missing after leaving his safety line. For approximately 35 minutes, Miroslav continued searching for the exit, but he eventually found himself back in the deep gallery. At this point, he remained stationary for about 5 minutes, possibly trying to figure out his next steps, or becoming disoriented in the darkness of the cave. During those 5 minutes of stillness in the deep gallery, Miroslav may have been taking a breather or trying to conserve his energy. Some experts suggest he might have been using an air pocket at the top of the cave to catch his breath. However, things took a turn for the worse when he lost control of his buoyancy and descended to the bottom of the gallery. Investigators believe that it was at this point, at the base of the gallery, that Miroslav was attacked and stabbed. By piecing together the sequence of events revealed by the dive computer data, the police started to piece together how the suspects could have carried out the murder. At first, investigators thought Miroslav might have been stabbed while still on the boat, and then taken to the deep gallery to cover up the crime. However, this theory didn't hold up because it would have been impossible for the murderers to manipulate Miroslav's movements, as recorded by his dive computer. Plus, they wouldn't have had enough time to return to the boat without suffering serious decompression sickness. Another theory was that one of Miroslav's diving buddies, who went to search for him, could have met him in the deep gallery and stabbed him with his knife. But the dive computer data showed that Miroslav was already dead by the time his friends went to look for him. So it seemed unlikely that his friends were responsible for his death. As investigators considered these possibilities, it became less likely that Miroslav was murdered by someone he knew. The timing and the data from the dive computer didn't support the theory that Miroslav was killed by anyone. With the possibility of murder ruled out, investigators turned to the idea that Miroslav may have stabbed himself with his own diving knife. However, this theory raised questions, so the police sought advice from military divers. These experts explained that military divers are trained to do everything possible to survive in any situation they encounter. Miroslav, on the other hand, was just a cook and not trained like military divers. He went diving for fun, not as a professional. Perhaps being alone in the deep gallery and feeling hopeless about being rescued at such a late hour, he may have made a desperate decision. He might have chosen to avoid the pain of drowning by ending his own life quickly with his dive knife. It's worth noting that dive knives are typically used by divers to cut lines in case they become tangled underwater. So in Miroslav's desperate situation, he might have seen his dive knife as the fastest way to escape a painful death. This theory offers a possible explanation for why Miroslav ended his own life. Following the investigations, the two men who were initially accused of murdering Miroslav were eventually released without facing any additional charges. Instead, they took legal action against the newspaper that had reported on the case. They claimed that Miroslav had likely taken his own life by stabbing himself when he realized he was lost and trapped in the underwater cave. The men argued that their friend's tragic death was a result of his own actions and not due to any wrongdoing on their part. They sought to clear their names and restore their reputations after being falsely accused of murder. We would like to thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed watching, take a dive on the like and subscribe buttons and hit the bell icon so you get notified when we come back with another exciting cave diving story.